let's jump in. Like I said, I'm Emily. I am so excited for today's event because we get to partner with another business that shares a really important mission with us. So I work at Cast Iron. We are a food business management platform, basically helping you take all of the annoying parts of running a food business and make it a little bit easier, a little bit more streamlined. So happy to share more, but you can learn more about Cast Iron at castiron.me. But why we're here today, we're here to talk about food labeling, how to make it happen, how to do it professionally, and ReciPal is here to help. So like I said, ReciPal is here for the same reason that we are, to help food business owners grow. And I know that lots of small businesses struggle with labeling, especially nutrition labeling. So that's where ReciPal really comes in. With that, Lev, I'll pass it over to you to introduce yourself and get things started.
Hey guys, I'm Lev, founder of ReciPal. And like Emily was saying, we don't do the same thing as Cast Iron, but similar kind of philosophy as far as trying to simplify and take like one other thing off a food entrepreneur's plate. That's mostly the nutrition labeling. So all the stuff that goes on like the side or the back of a packaged food. So we do a couple other things like costing and have like a basic inventory management tool, kind of focus on small, medium-sized food businesses, just kind of getting started out. And we were once I was once one of you guys, and we'll get into all the food labeling fun stuff. And like Emily said, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end, so try to move things along, and yeah, leave any questions and we'll handle those at the end. That's always the best part of these. So let me share my screen and walk you through some stuff. Yeah, so we're gonna talk about food labels and nutrition facts. I know most of you guys are home food businesses, and so your requirements are different than someone selling at like a Wegmans or ShopRite or Whole Foods. But maybe that's the goal. Maybe you're just trying to sell at the farmer's market. We'll kind of cover all that. But I'm Lev. I started ReciPal a long time ago, and we'll get into that story a little bit. So at one point in time, I was helping a bunch of friends make beef jerky. We were doing it completely illegally out of our founder's apartment in Jersey City. And a bunch of us really liked it. Jerky was delicious. It was fun to make it, hang out when we were 21, 22, 23. Just a fun thing to do on the side. And we actually started doing a food vendor event in Brooklyn, and other people turned out loved it as much as we did. And then we were kind of forced into turning it into a real business and finding a co-packer. You can't sell jerky out of your apartment or house like baked goods. So we had to find a co-packer. We had to go kind of that whole route. And one of the projects I was tasked with was figuring out our nutrition labeling. And that slowly led me on the path of creating ReciPal to make that a little easier, more affordable. We couldn't afford to send our products out to a lab or hire someone to do it because we had so many different flavors. So it turned into went from an Excel model to like a very basic web app, eventually turned into this business of ReciPal. And I read through all the FDA regulations, kind of figured out what defaults made sense, what options people wanted to see, and eventually turned into what ReciPal is today. So we're some like nutrition analysis and labeling tools are focused more on nutritionists. We're a little more focused to like a small food business, someone who's really busy, doesn't have time to read through all the documentation, just wants to get back to doing what they love, running their business, baking, selling, talking to customers. But that's That was a slant shack. So what needs to be on your label? We call it the big six. Statement of identity. That's like what your product is. It's not your brand, but if it's potato chips, it'd be potato chips. If it's like an energy bar or a snack bar, you have to say snack bar on the front of your product. So it's kind of like the high level description of what your product is. And you'll see that on pretty much all packaged goods. The net quantity statement, that's just how much of the product is in the package. And that's the net rather than gross weight. So it doesn't include the weight of the packaging. It's what you actually would consume that's in the package. That's the net quantity. The name and address of the manufacturer or packer or distributor. You guys, if you're a home-based business, you probably don't have a co-packer or distributor. That's going to be you. You do typically have to put your full business address. Like you're working out of your home, like that would be your home address. There's some exemptions there, but typically you'd have to put your full address. And you are allowed to just put the business name and city and zip code, city, state, and zip, rather than the full like street and number. If it's like easily findable in a phone book, basically in an online directory. And for a new like home-based business, that might not always be the case. So you probably want to put your full address on there to be compliant. So next, the ingredient list. Pretty much everyone needs to have that as well. That's going to be everything that's in your product in descending weight order. So if you're making cookies, that's flour, butter, sugar, salt, baking soda, baking powder, from the most to the least. We'll do nutrition fact labels last because we'll go over that in more detail, but allergen labeling, any allergens have to be listed as well. That can be covered in the ingredient list. So if you have like coconut in the ingredient list, that's actually okay, but usually people break it out anyway, so it's easier for customers to see what allergens are there. So that's also required. And nutrition fact labels, those are optional, especially for small businesses. But those are kind of the main 6 requirements that are generally on a food label. There's obviously other things that can be on there, like claims, like marketing materials, cooking instructions, kind of more salesy kind of things, but that's not generally required. Okay, moving on. So statement of identity, that's your organic popcorn. The net quantity has to be on the bottom third of the label. Has minimum font requirements. Basically, has to be not too small. It has to be in this. Here it's in like pounds or in ounces, and also metric. So this 0.88 ounces, 25 grams has to be in both. That's what goes on the front of the packaging. And then on the back or the side, you'll have your nutrition label, the ingredient list, allergens, and the business address. And those have to be all together without any like intervening marketing materials or anything else. Ingredient list, allergens, and manufacturing info. We'll deep dive on there. Again, ingredient lists go in descending weight order. So the ingredient that makes up most of your product goes first, and then the smallest things go in the end. You can aggregate things like spices, so you don't have to kind of give away the full secret sauce. And here for the allergens, it says contains coconut. We have coconut oil in the ingredient list, so you technically don't have to do that, but it's just best practice to include that in a separate allergen statement, just so it's really clear and easy to find. Different food allergens include milk, eggs, fish, shellfish, tree nuts, wheat, peanuts, soybeans. And in ReciPal, we kind of have all those check boxes, so it's hard to miss them. This produced in a facility that also uses milk and egg ingredients, we call that a facility allergen statement. That's purely optional, but has become more and more common on labels. You'll see it all the time. That's an option on ReciPal, and you don't have to do it, but and it's not really encouraged, but more and more people do it, and lots of people have allergies to different foods. So this kind of just become best practice and super common. Okay, and the nutrition label. So yeah, we kind of break down if and when you need a nutrition label. It's purely optional for raw fruits, vegetables, and fish, foods that contain insignificant amounts of all the nutrients, so like a coffee or a tea. Really small packages, so less than 12 square inches of basically surface area, and then small businesses that have less than $50,000 of food sales or less than $500,000 of total sales. So any of these categories, it's optional. You can still do it if you want. So on the other hand, it's required if you're making any nutrition claims. So high in fiber, high in protein, low calorie, you have to support it with some evidence, and that's the nutrition label. On the business size side, if you have more than $50,000 of food sales or more than $500,000 of total sales, you are required to do it. Usually once you hit that threshold, you have a window, I believe it's 18 months to comply. So it's not like you hit this threshold and you're immediately required to do it. And then businesses with more than 10 full-time employees or more than 100,000 units in sales, that's when you're required. And these sales numbers typically apply to wherever you're selling as well. So if you're trying to sell through like a Whole Foods or a bigger local grocery store, if they're over these limits, then you would be required to also. And if you're having a conversation with one of those, they'll typically want you to do that, want you to have nutrition labels as well. On the other hand, as far as like not just requirements, but you might want nutrition labels to get into those bigger grocery stores or even smaller ones, to be more transparent with your customers, be set up in the future when everyone always thinks they're going to have more free time in the future. But if your business is growing and then you do want to kind of sell retail or through grocery stores, if you have this out of the way, it's one less thing to figure out when you're negotiating with distributors and retailers, and you'll kind of just be good to go. And a lot of people also do it because their customers want it. If your market is a little more nutrition savvy, a little like reading their food labels, want to know what's in their product and what they're eating. That can also be something, even if you're really, really small, as a differentiator, just as a marketing tool. Okay, so how do I make a nutrition label? We'll walk through that quickly. Yeah, so we'll walk through ReciPal. Here we'll create a new recipe. This is just my personal dashboard, so there's a bunch of stuff in there, not too interesting. Say we're making cookies, we'll search for flour. We can add flour, butter, sugar. So we have a nutrition database in ReciPal. And so all these ingredients have nutrition information associated with them. So sugar per 100 grams has like 400 calories, and all that will kind of be calculated as part of your recipe. So we call our cast iron cookie. So we use 2 cups of flour, 8 tablespoons of butter, and maybe 4 ounces of sugar. So basically put in your recipe, it'll calculate the nutrition, say this makes one package of our cookies, and there's, I don't know, say a serving size is one cookie. There's 10 servings in the cookie. It'll automatically update the label based on our recipe. We'll say our net weight per package. Again, that's what goes on the front of your package is 500 grams. So each cookie is 50 grams. You can set your ingredient statement. Some of it will automatically be set, but we can change it to be kind of whatever we want there. Maybe there's a flavoring or color in our butter. We can update that. And then on the label page, here's where you can customize your label. So you can play with like optional vitamins. Maybe you want to show vitamin A. You can play with like the width of a label. If there's a bunch of options here, we can set our business address. And this is the linear format for smaller packages, but the default will probably be this vertical one. Down here we have our allergens. Here we have wheat, milk. What else is in our product? Yeah, just wheat and milk. And below we have the facility allergens as well. And the good thing about using something like ReciPal is we have a database of ingredients you can use that already has the nutrition information specifically for nutrition labeling. It will include things like added sugars, proper rules for fiber, all the vitamins, trans fats, which aren't always in every database. We've automatically figured out the like formatting rules, like the font sizes, the spacing, what's bold, what's not bold, kind of the layout options. It automatically follows the rounding rules. So you should never see a label with like 208 calories. It should always be rounded to the nearest 5 or 10. And then the output, you can download a PDF of your label or a PNG file. That'll just get downloaded to your computer. And from there, you can work with a local print shop or a designer. You can get like a printer for your home that specifically prints like labels and stickers. There's like thermal printers. Chiaro is a brand we've worked with that has pretty high quality labels. If you're just using a regular printer, you can use something like Avery templates. And you just stick those on a piece of paper. And they have a pretty good design tool online for kind of formatting everything and setting everything up. And there's a lot of online printers. Avery has a good solution for that. There's lots of others as well. The last thing I would like to go over is costing. So in ReciPal, you can also set up your cost. So based on your recipe, if you put in the cost of your ingredients, it'll tell you what your cost per package is, what your cost per batch is. You can include labor, packaging, overhead, and it'll tell you based on if you're working with a distributor, if you're working with a broker, or retailer down the line, how to price your product. And I harp on this a lot because usually when you're just starting out, you're not valuing your own time. You're not putting a cost to that. And so you're kind of assuming you're making money. And if you were to pay yourself even $10, $15, $20 an hour, if you eventually grew and hired someone for that job and you weren't factoring in those costs, you're kind of in for a rude awakening. And these are the kind of mistakes we made with our jerky company early on that I bring up all the time. So people hopefully don't make them. And then same thing with the margins. If you don't build in some cushion and you do want to eventually expand to retail, you want to build in some cushion for that, because if you want to sell at a grocery store and they're taking a 40% margin and you're working with a distributor as well, then you basically have to double the price of your product to make the same amount of money. So that's cost. Another kind of simple tool within ReciPal to help you with your food business. And that's it as far as our presentation. Here's our contact information. I think Emily was saying that she'll send around the presentation and I guess the recording as well. So you guys will have that. Yeah, you can open it up to questions.
This was awesome. Thank you, Lev. Super helpful. And we'll share out your contact information and links and everything afterwards as well, along with the recording. So keep an eye out for that. We do have a couple of questions. First, really relevant to what you just talked about with margins. What kinds of margins do you recommend? A home-based or small commercial kitchen-based, basically just a small food business who, doesn't want to be charging $50 a cookie. How do you think that these business owners should think about their margins?
That's a really good question and not something I have a good answer for. There's no like hard and fast rule. But you can kind of model it out if you know how many cookies you're making, how many you're making over the course of the year. Maybe some people are just doing this for fun. Maybe it's a hobby. Maybe you're treating it as a real business and your family is relying on it for income. So kind of have to understand what the goals are, short and long term, to arrive at a good answer for that. Yeah, if you know how much you think you can sell, or you have like a couple months of data and can extrapolate that for the rest of the year, you kind of figure it out. Like, okay, we're going to sell 10,000 cookies this year, and you needed to net you like $10,000, then you need to make $1 a cookie basically, and can add that on top of your costs. But otherwise, you can look at what other people are doing. Like, you obviously need a competitive product as far as competitive pricing, but at the same time, this is like you're not going to be able to compete with like Entenmann's or whoever's selling cookies in a Stop and Shop. So it's a premium product. It's made by hand locally. The people who are buying it probably know you and want to support you, so they're willing to pay a premium for that. So kind of to look at the market, understand how, like, be honest with yourself, how you're approaching it, whether it's a business, a hobby, if you're trying to make money, if you're just doing it to meet people and kind of keep yourself busy. And then if you do have goals of eventually selling retail and growing, kind of keep those margins in mind of those kind of partners and channels down the line.
Yeah, great call. I think definitely if you are handmade artisan food business and you're trying to compete with, the big box stores like, a Costco cake, like you are in a losing game, and it is not going to, it's just not going to end well. So definitely think about.
And especially when you're factoring in the cost of labor, like, if someone's making tens of thousands of units at a time and you're doing a couple dozen, maybe 100, like, the bulk of the cost is going to be your time. So maybe you just pay yourself those, like, build in that $20 an hour or whatever you're comfortable with. And that's kind of like it's not your margin, but that's kind of going to you as like a paying for your time. And that's another way to think about it.
Yeah. We did get a question from Jen asking, what does it cost to use ReciPal?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So there's I think I'm still sharing my screen. So there's a free trial for 3 recipes. You just create an account and you'll be able to set up 3 recipes and labels. Then beyond that, you can pay per recipe. It's this $19 each single serving option. And then if you have a lot of recipes, you can use $49 a month business plan. Those are the 2 most common ways people use it. That's a good question. Shows you what kind of sales person I am.
Yes, they have to ask. We did get another question about the ingredients in your database. Amanda maybe uses a lot of gluten-free, vegan, those kind of ingredients. Are those like, would Bob's gluten-free flour be in your database?
That's super common. We have lots of businesses kind of in that boat, so we have a lot of those ingredients, and anything that's not in there, you can always create your own ingredient just based on what's on the back of the label and use that information. So pretty flexible in that regard, but we have a lot of those ingredients as well.
Awesome. I'm curious, was there anything that you learned while you were running your jerky business about labeling that was surprising to you, or even while you were creating ReciPal, like anything labeling specific that was a shock?
Yeah, I mean, with the nutrition labeling, it was pretty intimidating, and kind of everyone thinks like, oh, we have to like send our product out to get tested to a lab, which is not the case, and you can use something like ReciPal to do a database analysis, and that's one of the kind of approved FDA methods of figuring out the nutrition of your product. And what I learned was, so like the FDA is like a reactive rather than like a proactive body. So you're not submitting your labels to anyone generally. Maybe there's like, if you're a cottage food business or where you're based, maybe there's some local laws, but the FDA is not approving labels, and you can get audited. It's kind of like the approach if there's like a complaint or they randomly decide to, but it's basically like a Scouts honor kind of situation with labeling, and that's why you see so many people in hot water like making kind of absurd claims that they didn't review with a lawyer or someone that understands labeling. You can't just like put anything on your label and put it out there. Like, you can initially, but you're at the end of the day responsible for what you put on your label. So there's kind of a pro and con of kind of being a reactive body like that. Like, you can put anything on there, but you're responsible at the end of the day for what goes on there. So it's kind of a faster process, but it's on you to make sure that everything is kosher. That's where tools like ReciPal, like, kind of, we have guardrails to make sure you don't put anything on your nutrition label that your recipe doesn't support nutritionally, kind of have like smart defaults for all those things.
Is there a minimum that you think should be included on a small business's food labels? Like, do we have to show things like calories and fat? What would you say is like the bare minimum?
As far as the nutrition label?
Yeah. Or just like labels in general. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the like big six, like you need the statement of identity, the net quantity, the business and address, the ingredient list, and allergens. I'm assuming for most small food businesses, like cottage food businesses, a nutrition label is purely optional. But the thing is, if you're putting it on there, then you can't like say, oh, it's optional for me, so I'm just going to put calories on there or like do my own thing. Like, if you're going to put it on there, you do have to follow the rules. So like the formatting rules and all that. So that like this label doesn't qualify, but if we, there's an option here. If your label qualifies, it's like one of the things that ReciPal kind of determines for you. There's a simplified label that removes anything that you have like zero amounts of. So if we change our recipe to be like just honey, so it'll just be sugar basically, and go to the label, like everything is zero, and we click show in simplified format, and then you just have calories, fat, sodium, carbs, protein. So all the stuff that's basically bold, you always have to have on there. And sometimes you qualify for the simplify format, and there's just different kind of layouts. But yeah, if you're going to put anything nutrition related on your packaging, you probably have to support it with like a full nutrition label.
Okay, makes sense. I like that you guys have the different options though for, you know, you can have that simplified short version.
Right. Yeah, exactly. If you qualify for it, then it's
Yes.
a great option.
Yeah, yeah. Last question, I think, unless anybody has any others. Oh, we've got a shout out for having some products in your database. So great, great job, ReciPal.
Yeah, with the on the organic stuff, like you don't always need to use an organic ingredient when doing like a nutrition analysis, because the nutrition will be pretty much the same. That's one thing as far as just using ReciPal or some other tool. You don't need to specify that's like you're using organic flour or whatever the ingredient is. You'll probably be better off using the like USDA data. That's like what our database is based on. So that's one small note to make people's lives a little easier rather than searching far and wide for like organic ingredients in the database.
Sure, great call. If you use, like, let's say you make cookies and you use Hershey's chocolate in your cookies, do you need to, you know, obviously that's using more than just like cacao, there's more in,
right.
Do you need to include all of the sub ingredients in?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so like this is how this chocolate chip ingredient shows up. Again, the brand doesn't typically matter too much. If it's like the same percentage chocolate, yeah, here you probably don't need to say 64% dark chocolate chips, but you say chocolate chips, and if there's any sub ingredients in parentheses, you'd list them out. So that's how it would show up on your label. That's how you'll see it here on the ingredient statement. It's a good question.
Yeah, in the parentheses. All right, awesome.
Exactly.
Any closing thoughts or anything else that people should know about labeling or ReciPal?
I think we covered most of the labeling stuff. If people have questions, they can obviously reach out to us. Our contact information, the website's just recipal.com, and you can call us, you can live chat us, email us, and we'll try to help. We try to make it super simple and have little tutorials and videos throughout the site to kind of help people on board. But we're always happy to help answer any questions. And people are always pretty amazed how much simpler it is once they get into it than when they were like, oh God, this is another annoying project I have to do for this business I'm like maybe in over my head with already. And so, yeah, most people figure it out totally on their own, but we're happy to help. And yeah, don't forget about the understanding your costs and thinking about that a little bit into the future. And yeah, I think you guys will be in good shape with cast iron and the tools they have too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us today. If you have any questions, reach out to ReciPal at their website, recipal.com, or info@recipal.com. And I hope you all have a good afternoon. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.